the rest of it. Your coat's still laying down there, though.
Entertain a motion to reconvene
So
on the
moved.
executive session.
Second.
A motion and a second. Just submit your votes. This is a technicality, ladies and gentlemen, that we have to go through to get back into. Submit your votes, please. Votes, unanimous approval then to move from executive session back into our Guthrie Public Works Authority meeting. Item number 6 is consider action pending investigation of the claim. No action was taken at this time. With that being the last item on our agenda for City Public Works, we are adjourned. I now call to order our City Council meeting of November 19th. Our consent agenda is items A and B. A is the approval of the minutes of City Council meeting of November 5th. As amended, I believe all the councilmen have received the amendment. B is the approval of hangar property lease agreement with Matheson Custom Homes. And I will entertain a motion then for...
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda item?
Just to make sure they know that that was amended. That's really, I want to make.
Did everybody hear that?
There was a couple of typos on there.
There was a...
They were pretty minor, but they were significant.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and I think that was sent out electronically, but so that is amended. I think it has been handed out with the minutes also. Submit your votes.
All votes are in.
See the votes. Unanimous approval of consent agenda items A and B. Item number 3 on our agenda is discussion and possible action to adopt ordinance 3312, rezoning of 6.16 acres of property in southwest quarter of section 4.
3321.
3321. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Yeah, this is a request to rezone a property. It's over at Walnut and Mockingbird. I'm not sure if it's up on the screen, but it's right across the west of the intersection of Walnut and Mockingbird.
Where the deer run around all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The request is, the current zoning is R2. They're looking to rezone it to A1, which is general agricultural. The Guthrie Greenhouses, which is adjacent to the west, is the property owner, and they're looking to do some additional greenhouses, and that's the reason they're looking to rezone it, because in R2, a ag use is, or a greenhouse is not an allowed use. The comprehensive plan does designate the property as ag open space. Large reason for that, from what I could tell, was it is in the floodplain, so it was probably looked at as to have it ag open space, but from a comp plan perspective, the proposed land use would fit in with the proposed comp planned land use designation. The only other thing I was going to add is, in the area you had in your packet, I believe, a zoning map. There is some agricultural up to the north part of the city there. In and around that area, it is zoned R1. To the adjacent to the north is R1. To the east is across Walnut. That's all R1. And then there's the R2 to the south, but there is some additional ag besides the greenhouses up to the north of that by the high school in that. As was provided in your packet, there were a number of protest letters that were provided to you. In fact, there were 49 property owner letters that were provided. On Monday, there was an additional 13 that were provided to staff, which I had given you as a handout. Of those, 2 of them actually were duplicates, so in total, you're looking at about 61 total, or 60 total letters of protest. The map I gave you indicates the property owners. I thought it would be a little bit visual, or better visual for the council to see specifically where these property owners are. The last thing to add on that is, there is a provision in our code that if there's a certain amount of written protest, it would require a 3/5 vote. In this case, even though some of the letters were submitted late, it requires 3 days prior, so the deadline wasn't met. So at this point, only 12 of those count towards that, which doesn't meet the threshold, so a simple majority would be all that's needed for an approval. And with that, I'll leave it to the council if you have any questions. Otherwise, I know there are people here that would like to speak.
Okay.
Dan, what is the threshold?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Oh, there's 2 provisions. It's land area, but the one that usually qualifies is at least 50% of the property owners within the 300-foot notice area. So if we have at least 50% of those people that have written protest, it would then require a 3/5 vote, which would be a 5-2 versus a 4-3. In this case, like I said, only 12 would qualify for that. There was a total of 41 property owners within that, so you would need at least 22 in order to get the threshold to the 3/5.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the planning commission voted.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Councilman Taylor. The Planning Commission's recommendation was a recommendation of denial by a 2-to-1 vote.
Okay. All right. And any other questions of staff? Okay, we have a number of people that want to speak on this issue. Trailer Pitts? Mr. Pitts? Yes, sir. Please identify yourself, your name, and your address, please.
My name is Trailer Pitts. I live at 1109 Pin Oak Drive. It's approximately 1.5 blocks east of the property in question. I am opposed to rezoning this area. I'm primarily concerned that by rezoning this to a commercial area, it is going to lower property values for us. I understand that you guys purchased the property in '95, but the majority of the houses that were built there were built in the mid-'70s. So they were there prior to you guys purchasing the business. I'm concerned that by adding a bunch of greenhouses right there, it is going to be a visual eyesore, along with increasing traffic and, well, frankly, the smell of growing medicinal marijuana or hemp in the area.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Andrea Bennett?
Hello, I'm Andrea Bennett. I live at 1103 North Walnut. I am directly to the north of the property boundary. And they actually purchased, I guess, the greenhouse in '95, I guess, but the land that was right next to my house was not purchased until the 2011 timeframe from the people that own the children's home. So they sold that parcel of land. It sat vacant for years and years and years. My son mowed it. The guy that stays behind me would mow it. We'd keep it up. My fence is the one that borders it and comes around the front. They tore down the front of my fence, but that's a whole nother conversation. So they took possession of that land in 2011. I am here today because I oppose them zoning it, rezoning it. And that is primarily based on the property values will decline. When I purchased my home, I did not think that I would be living next door to a greenhouse. I just didn't think that, or I wouldn't have bought my home there. So I really would like for you guys to consider the impact it will have to the neighborhood. I'm not opposed to anyone trying to do better and increase the scope of your business, but there are other areas you can farm or grow or whatever you would like to do in that space for that type of purpose. The land that's north of our addition or our neighborhood is primarily not as populated as the area that we currently live in. So there's a difference. There's not, like, they have agriculture right down the street. It's still a totally different area. That's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sylvia Oaks? No, I do not wish to speak. Okay. Ryan Cotting?
Good evening. My name is Ryan Cotting. I live at 1121 North Walnut. Everything's basically already been said. First and foremost, we all know if greenhouses are allowed to be built in that area, the detriment that it's going to have to property values for not only myself, but everybody in that neighborhood. When we purchased our home in 2003, one of the reasons we purchased that home was because of the neighborhood, the kids, the families. It was a family area, close to the schools. It wasn't in the middle of a agricultural or commercial area. When their land was purchased from the Burgess Trust or family in 2011, they purchased it knowing that that property was zoned residential, just as I did when I purchased my house, knew that it was residential. So I caution the council that allowing rezoning of this property is setting a precedent that I don't know is a road you want to go down. Many of you know, my family, we show livestock all around the country. I would love to rezone my house and keep a show calf or two there when they're sick or need to do a little work. Be kind of nice. But it's just not the area. I would never ask to do something like that. It's a residential area. It's a family area. You hear a lot of people talking about the marijuana, and that's not the issue. It's not the issue. The issue with it is, though, this is an all or nothing item. If you allow this to be rezoned to agriculture, you can't limit what they can or cannot do as long as it fits within that agriculture zoning. This does not fit in this area. It doesn't fit in this neighborhood. This neighborhood has been one of the crown jewels from Guthrie for years and years and years. And I would hope that the council would maybe look at it from our view. Would you want in your neighborhoods, many of you, some of you even live in this neighborhood, would you want the greenhouses to be built within a few hundred feet or 100 yards of your house? I think you would agree with us that it's probably not the image that we want. It's nothing personal against Guthrie Greenhouses. I own a business. I support their business. I hope their business grows to be the largest greenhouse in the state of Oklahoma. But they own other property in other places where they can grow their business, just as I have mine outside of the residential area. I've also had people talking to us about sales tax, and I would bring forward, they're a wholesale company. They told us that in the meeting. Wholesale is not generating tax dollars to the city of Guthrie. Those tax dollars are being collected within the communities and the cities where they are being retail sold to the end user. And that's all that I would like to add. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cotting. I know that we, at some points in time, we didn't have enough of the public announcement application to fill out. And I guess at this point, I will ask if there was anybody that didn't have a chance that wants to speak against this rezoning, just to make sure that I give everybody opportunity before we hear. Did you have a chance to fill one out? I will allow it because we did have, we ran out of copies for a while. So if you would, please state your name and your address.
Yes, my name's Teresa Lamb, and I live at 1111 Magnolia Court. My property is the property that backs up to the property that's going to be rezoned. It actually, the dumpsters are right behind my fence. So we are affected by everything that goes on that property when the trash gets emptied, when they take down trees, when they do controlled burns. It all directly affects our situation and our quality of life. We bought our house in 2015. I have 2 boys. One graduated in 2015. The other's a senior this year. We bought it because it was a great neighborhood. It was close to the schools. It was going to be great to hold on to and resell in the future. It was going to grow. And since then, you know, I know there's been problems selling houses in the neighborhood. Before we bought it, it had been on the market for 13 months. Joan Robinette couldn't get it sold mostly because of the dumpsters. And, you know, since they've taken over, they've taken out trees. We've seen a decrease in the deer. And, you know, I'm really concerned about our quality of life and, you know, the neighborhood feel if it gets turned into greenhouses versus an open space. You know, the cross-country team runs through there, the kids walking back and forth through school. If it's turned into greenhouses, you know, I'm just concerned about how that's going to affect the overall view of the neighborhood.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Lamb. Thank you. Okay, now the applicants, Mr. Jones, are you going to be speaking for all of the 2 owners also, or are
Yes, sir.
all 3 of you have signed? I just wanted to know if you're speaking for all.
Initially, and then I think they may have.
Okay, please identify yourself and address.
My name is Ryan Jones. I actually live in Logan County, north side of Edmond. My business is in Edmond, but I represent Guthrie Greenhouses on their application to rezone. And I just wanted to start out by saying, what we have here is a property that's zoned residential and cannot be used for residential purposes. So as the zoning code goes, primary purpose being appropriate, productive use of land, that's the ultimate thing we're trying to avoid, is having a piece of land that can't be used for anything. A lot of the comments at the commission level and just now centered around this parcel as kind of the neighborhood field, I think was the term used, which is completely understandable. If it's been that way for a long period of time, people get used to it. I would want to live next to a green belt. I would want to live next to a field. There's no fault in that. I just think that the question is not whether or not that's beneficial to the surrounding parcel owners. The question is more, can we force a landowner by denying a rezoning request into a zoning classification that allows no beneficial use whatsoever? The staff report is pretty clear that the comprehensive plan has always seen that swath of land between the creek and Walnut as ag open space. The future expected uses showed residential use to the north and to the south. So the element of mixed use that creates is not something we're introducing with this rezoning. It's something that was foreseen and expected in the comprehensive plan from the beginning. And then regarding the marijuana issue, I appreciated the staff report pointing out we can't contract zone, we can't try to regulate specific uses at the zoning level or stipulate that what we will and won't do. But I did want to clarify that the tenor of the conversation at the commission became about marijuana or no marijuana, and that's not even really the planned use of this facility. It would be a normal plant nursery, just like the existing facility adjacent to it. My clients have stated that as a business consideration, it would generate too much risk and liability. They don't live or operate near that parcel, so they don't plan to grow marijuana there. Aside from that, I think it would be just an inappropriate forum to regulate that issue when the issue is really land use, and we'd have an essentially worthless piece of land if it's not rezoned.
Can I ask a question real quick? In the interest of the people that are sitting here, you're saying that it's not their intended use. Are they gonna grow marijuana there or not? Period.
I'll let one of you speak to that.
I think that's gonna help the citizens to understand this a little bit better.
Well, you can just say it right there.
At the microphone, please. At the microphone. And identify yourself.
My name is Tara Tischhauser, and I live at 2000 North Sooner Road in Guthrie. And I'm the owner of the Guthrie Greenhouses property, both in town and out of town. And for this parcel of land, absolutely not. We will not be growing medical marijuana in town. That is not our planned use for it. It's not in the future use for it. We're not interested in doing that. But I can say it's also irrelevant because our agricultural parcel inside of town that we're operating our nursery business right now, we could be growing medical marijuana there. We're not.
Right.
We're not bringing it into town. We don't want to have it in town. We know it smells. Like he said, we don't live on that land right there, and it would be a risk factor.
Well, it's very close to the high school too, so there's a lot of concerns there. I can see what they're concerned about.
And I'm talking about the parcel in town. And also, actually, for medical marijuana, growing it, there is no law for schools. It's only for dispensaries. But I'm talking about the parcel inside of town. We are not planning on growing marijuana there for what we're asking for rezoning. That's my answer on that.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll be
Mr. Jones?
Very brief, just one final comment.
So I got a quick question, though. So you say, the land's zoned residential. We talk about the comprehensive plan that shows it as ag because it's flood property, probably is why it shows it as a potential ag scenario. The bottom line is it's residential. Y'all bought it knowing it's residential. Okay, so the argument of, it's going against the comprehensive plan is inaccurate. because it was bought residential. That's all I had to say.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, and I do think that it was, the comprehensive plan, we diverged from it a bit when the surrounding area was rezoned to develop to the north and to the south, probably without factoring into the equation, hey, we just zoned off this parcel that's a floodplain residential, and now it's worthless. And there's been a lot of talk about property values, which is highly relevant in our discussion. All the talk, though, has been about the other property values. And as Planning Commissioner Bryant stated, I think, at the hearing, there's really no evidence that mixed-use communities end up having, in the long run, lower property values than purely residential communities. If there's any data to back up any substantial decrease in home values, we haven't seen it. If there is a decrease, it's probably somewhat marginal. On the other hand, if the only use of this parcel is residential and it can't be used as such, the value plummets. And any potential buyer would look at it and say, you have a residential property that can't be used for what it's zoned for, and you've already tried to get it changed and failed. So, I mean, it's worthless to us at that point.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Jones before he sits down?
What was your intention when you bought the residential property? Was it part of a single parcel that went all the way across?
We have, yeah, from one block to the other.
Okay, so it was all, you bought it all as one chunk?
Why don't we let, I
The
understood. that-
greenhouses
that-
and the,
It was all
Just
one parcel that
just a
you
minute,
bought?
I understand you were going to speak, so
My
go
name is
ahead.
Jesse
speak.
Tischhauser.
Jesse?
I'm one of the owners of Guthrie Greenhouses while I live at 2000 North Center Road. We bought the greenhouses in 1995. It's about a 35-acre or 25-acre tract of land that is on Broad Street and over on Wentz Boulevard, or Wentz Street. And in 2011, we purchased that property that's basically all floodplain from the children's home because they had no use for it because it's all floodplain. And we use it for access between.
Because they couldn't use it.
Because they couldn't use it, right. We all saw how their property turned out when they rezoned from residential to multifamily residential. But yeah, that was our intention, so we could just access our property from the east.
Okay.
Right, and since then, our business has grown from about, when we purchased it in 95, we had about 4 or 5 acres of greenhouses, and now we have over 13 acres of greenhouses. So we filled that space up completely, and our business is thriving. We're the oldest and largest greenhouse in the state, actually probably the only greenhouse left in the state, and we're trying to expand it without having to go farther away to bring our plants back into town to ship them.
If we allowed you to make this expansion, what kind of job growth does that mean for Guthrie?
That's a good question. Probably not a lot.
Okay.
When you talked about expansion, and I think at the Planning Commission, there was comments that you are talking about bringing some of your growing greenhouses closer so that you would be able to then be more efficient. Is that what the plan is? Is it just moving from, you have greenhouses, I guess, north of
Correct, right, just north of
high school now?
Yes, we have 40 acres of land just north of
And
high
so
school.
you would be bringing them so that you have a more efficient operation because they would be close? You wouldn't have to be moving them the 2 miles or whatever it is? Is that the main driving force here?
That's exactly right. We're actually building more greenhouses up out of city limits as well, because we've expanded. Our largest customer is the Atwood's family out of Enid, and they went from 45 stores to 65 stores over the last 5 years. So we're trying to keep up with that demand so that we can grow enough tomatoes and peppers to not lose that customer.
Okay.
Right. We used to do a lot of this stuff up in the 40 acres there, and we've got 3 or 4 trucks that would bring plants all spring long past the high school, past the cross-country team running, all that stuff, slowing down the school traffic, and have to bring them into our main location there off of Walnut Street to ship everything.
Okay. All right. One of the other concerns that I heard was the increased traffic along that access road from the east. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, Mr. Jones, you had your chance. No, I'm kidding.
You had your 5 minutes.
I
You
just-
already know your address.
It's easy, I think, to move past the zoning classification decision into the actual use and say, the use is going to cause X amount of traffic. we're moving from a higher density classification, R2, to a lower density classification, ag. And so I don't know that it would make a whole lot of sense to deny a rezoning for less density based on traffic and density concerns. And if you all have anything to add to that.
And it will not increase traffic at all. Traffic is going to stay exactly the same for that piece of property. The same trucks that come in or our employees that come in is going to be the same thing. We're going to have a little bit more, actually it should reduce us on the road with our little trucks and our trailers and plants going up and down the street. We won't be hauling stuff back and forth to our shipping department because everything, all the bedding plant business that we do for spring and fall will be grown right there on that acreage. So if anything, it would reduce traffic is what it would do.
So you wouldn't be shipping more from that site?
From where we're asking about rezoning?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, within the property, no, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Well, it seems to me that if you're growing more vegetables, let's just say, there, and you are shipping them out to Atwoods or wherever.
Well, we're not going to be bringing down from the property outside of town, we're not going to be bringing that same kind of product into it. We're trying to keep that business a little the same or a little bit more, but no, it won't change traffic as in our delivery trucks or anything. So what we're doing is taking the greenhouses we were using outside of town, we're changing the use for those and condensing all of our bedding plants to the in-town area. So we won't be traveling back and forth with those plants, and that business, that area will all stay right there in town. Understand?
Not really. So if you ship, if you're sending bedding plants to TLC.
Right.
And that, a greenhouse that wasn't there now, but might be if you get the zoning application approved, how wouldn't that increase more trucks going in and out? If you're,
Our shipping department is in that block of land between Went Street and Walnut. We used to grow, we have 3 acres of greenhouse up off of Cooksey Road, and we're going to hopefully be able to fit 2 acres of greenhouse in this little 6-acre tract of property. So we will actually be growing less plants than we were before because we don't have as much space. And all the plants were always brought to that location to be shipped out to Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, all over the Midwest. So we'll be doing more stuff in that location, but we'll be bringing less stuff in. We'll just be shipping it all the same as we were before out.
okay?
Does that make sense? Correct.
You're just not shipping in anymore, you're shipping out.
Right.
That's all
yeah.
you're doing.
So it'll be there rather than up the street. We won't have to bring it here to ship it out. We'll have it right here. It'll go down our driveway to our shipping department and then go out.
Cool.
Okay? Other questions by the council?
I have a comment if I
Yes.
could.
Leroy?
Of course, you could probably tell by my gray hair, I've been doing this for a number of years, since 1979, and rezoning can be a very emotional issue. And I just want to commend both parties tonight. It's been done in a very polite, and everybody has been concise and articulate in their views, and there's not been any derogatory statements and that nature. And that just makes me feel good about the community that you can have this type of discussion, because I've been to a lot of zoning meetings where they get unruly and can be quite negative. And anyway, I just want to commend both sides for sticking to their facts and being polite and concise and articulate in their comments tonight.
Okay, right, very good, very good. Yes, sir. Second thoughts?
No, I just have one, I didn't notice it or didn't pay
Identify
attention.
yourself again, if you would.
Ryan Cotting, 1121 North Walnut. I didn't pay attention, didn't notice it when I was speaking earlier, but one of the councilmen that represents this ward is not up here. Is he missing? Are we
He-
waiting on Dawn?
He has
Recused
recused himself.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Did he really?
Thank you for allowing me to speak to this august body. I didn't get one of those, Colonel, so I'm sorry. Al Ingram at 1105 Pin Oak Drive. All respect to y'all's intent, but I was a realtor for 33 years, and when somebody came to me and says, I want to buy that 6 acres over there, I would say, what are you going to do with it? Well, I'm going to make a business out of it. I would make it contingent, the purchase of that property contingent on the zoning change. This would never happen if that were done. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. And again, thank you for everybody's comments. These are challenging issues, and you know, the unfortunate thing in some of the decisions that this council and many of our boards and commissions have to make is that not everybody goes away happy. And the best that we can do is try to make sure we have given everybody opportunity to express their concerns, their position, and I think that's been allowed today, and you've done, as Leroy has, city manager has identified, I think done that with logic and not emotion, and that's appreciated. I think we all want to be partners, and congratulations on the expansion of your business and the success of your business. We also want to be good neighbors. And that goes to the whole neighborhood. And I think that, I speak for everybody in this room, whether you're the business involved or the residents involved.
I'd like to make one comment.
Yes,
if I
sir.
may. When you originally bought the land, though, it was bought for access, right? It wasn't bought for this business, it was bought for access.
It was access for this business.
But
Right,
it
but not to
wasn't,
expand it.
not to expand it, it was built for access to the business. So the thought process was it was bought for access.
The thought process was someday if we need that land to build on it, hopefully we can do that. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, it takes, we grew over the years. We didn't grow in 1 year. It took us
Right.
the last 22 years to grow.
No, I know that, but I'm talking about when you first bought it, though.
You're hopeful?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
yeah.
thinking someday hopefully we could build greenhouses over there and grow some more plants. Yeah, we were. We were gonna deal with, or possibly serve residents or employees because they live in our property. I mean, yeah, we wanna use the property.
But you couldn't do that because it's a floodplain.
Could I just interrupt here for a second?
Well-
If this is going to go on, we need to get her next to the mic, so
That would be nice.
if you'd get up to the mic, please.
I'm just trying to make a point.
Right.
That when you bought the property, you bought it for access. You didn't buy it for future expansion, because if you did, you would have made it contingent upon being able to rezone the property to be able to do something with it.
Actually,
Yeah,
we bought the
I think-
property originally, her father lives across right behind the children's home, so he has, I think, 9 of the 15 acres that we purchased over there. So he has a residence over there.
Okay.
And then he quick claim deeded
Quitclaim deed.
this part that he didn't need to the greenhouse so that we could have
Okay.
access through that back way. So
Okay.
in
So it was-
2011,
it was-
yeah, our revenue
I
was
get it.
probably a third of, or 2/3 of what it is now, so we wouldn't have been able to expand, much less, we could barely build the road to get in and out of there, much less expand at that point.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions of the
Well,
council?
I do have a comment. The last thing that I want to do is hamper your business.
Yeah.
And I think everybody up here feels exactly like I do. The last thing we want to do is cause a problem with business, and we're trying to bring business to Guthrie, not get rid of it. And whether there's employees or not that are added to your added income, your success is great for Guthrie, and I'm happy for you. But at the same time, we've got to look at all these individuals out here that live around there and look at, like the mayor said, it's a really tough decision we're in right here, because I don't want to, the last thing that I want to do is hamper anybody's business in Guthrie in any way. But at the same time, I still have to look at all these individuals that live next to that and try to figure out what we can do. So maybe there's a solution somewhere in between that we can do besides zoning this.
Is there?
Oh.
Have we looked at everything?
I don't know.
This is where we're starting.
Have we looked at special use?
This is where we're starting.
Excuse me? This is the beginning?
I don't
Okay.
believe special use allows greenhouses. You could grow outdoor without any buildings, but that doesn't really do us as much good as being able to cover things up in January and February.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good. Anybody else? You okay? Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion then to adopt ordinance number 3321, which is the rezoning of the 6.16 acres from R1, R2 to A1.
So let's be clear. A yes vote is to adopt and a no vote is to deny.
Correct.
I make a motion.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, so just to confirm, if you are voting yes on this ordinance, you are approving the proposed rezoning, and a no is to be against it. Okay, everybody understand?
Yep.
Let's see the votes. It's unanimous from all those that are present and able to vote to disapprove the ordinance requesting the rezoning. Thank you for your input. And hope you success in your business, continued success. Item number 4, discussion and possible action to adopt ordinance number 3322 to amend ordinance number 3075, known as the Historic Preservation Ordinance. Staff, Leroy?
I think we have a few people that may be leaving. If it's okay, I'll wait just a few
Sure,
minutes.
absolutely.
Couple minutes to let everybody shuffle.
We got people to speak on this too, or not?
Probably.
You go first, though.
Yes.
Man, you grew old while you was gone. You got old while you was gone.
We got Chatty Cathy here tonight.
I've been stuck in an attic all day. Dad.
Okay.
You gotta talk to
Okay.
somebody sometime.
I will start out, we've had a couple other issues that I've had to deal with the last week or so, so if you notice that there's any typos in my presentation, please bear with me and forgive me. I had to kind of put this together in between discussions on some of our other issues tonight. City staff recognizes clearly there's been some miscommunication and differences in opinion on what entities have final authority over various elements of Mineral Wells Park project. City staff, of course, takes partial responsibility for any miscommunications or misunderstandings. The Historic Preservation Commission is not the enemy. City staff does appreciate the passion of the Historic Preservation Commission and their commitment to our community. However, we have come to a point that we disagree on some elements, and it's not clear who makes final decision, and we would like some clarity there. Most of the headbutting or disagreements have probably been between myself and the chairman of the HBC. Joe Chappell and I are personal friends. We'll probably be personal friends tomorrow. We may even have lunch together. So if we say things tonight, it doesn't mean we dislike each other or we're enemies or anything like that. We just disagree on some points. I don't think city staff is not the enemy. I think city staff's just trying to implement projects to enhance the quality of life in our community and to make Guthrie more appealing to retain and recruit young families, young professionals, and entrepreneurs. Not everyone will agree with my presentation tonight. I respect their opinion, and while they may disagree, hopefully they will at least respect that I'm entitled to have an opinion as well. However, currently, things are not working well, and the situation needs to be addressed, in my opinion. So I've kind of done my apology in advance. I'm going to start out, what is this? And what I learned in college is a camel is a horse designed by committee.
Half of it.
If you got too many players involved and too many groups and decision maker, and it's not clear who makes final decision, then you don't get something designed well. It goes 100 different ways. And that's a saying that a British car designer came up with, but it has a lot of truth to it. You can't have too many chiefs and not enough engines on a project. The way I see it, there are some people that believe there are elements to the Historic Preservation Commission ordinance that the hierarchy command, even though the city council approves the project and instructs city staff to build it, then we're subject to go into the HPC, and if we don't get a certificate of appropriateness, then we're being told by HPC that staff can't follow through and do what the city council's telling us. We got some concerns about that hierarchy. The other way, if you look at it and turn the triangle around and you look at them as co-equals, then city staff basically has two bosses. And if one of them tells you one thing, one of them tells you another, who do you listen to? Of course, it's pretty easy for me. I know who signs my check.
Sign your own check.
That's the best idea I've heard tonight. To me, it's more city council is the final decision maker. City staff and the Historic Preservation Commission are more at the same level. And on public projects, HPC should be more in an advisory capacity and working with staff to make sure that the public projects are done appropriately to complement the historic district. I want to start out, there seems to be some misconceptions about city staff by at least some players in the community, that city staff does not support or have an appreciation for preserving Guthrie's unique historic treasures and rich cultural history. Some express city staff has limited experience dealing with historic assets, that city and staff and consultants have limited knowledge to design and build public works and park projects. I'd like to take just a few moments to try to address some of those misconceptions. I'm going to show you some historic preservation efforts that I've been involved in the past. I might point out all the projects I'm going to point out were not done with the benefit of a Historic Preservation Commission. All the prior communities that I worked in did not have a Historic Preservation Commission. We did those things because they were right things to do. And I'm also going to show some examples of prior community improvement and park-related projects. I worked 10 years in the city of Coffeyville, and while it's a different history, Coffeyville, Kansas has a pretty elaborate history and cultural amenities as well. During my tenure there, during my tenure there, this is the building, one of the banks the Daltons tried to rob. And that building has been completely restored, and that was predominantly a city-funded project. The restoration of the outside was pretty much done when I started my tenure. But we did come back during my tenure and put a new roof on the project. We tuck pointed the bricks. We brought in a special restoration firm to do that because the quality of the masonry and the tuck pointing had to be matched so that we didn't do damage by putting the new masonry in the tuck pointing process. During my tenure, we took the bank area, this part's occupied by the chamber. We took the bank area that was involved in the robbery, and we did research on what it looked like in 1892. We found as many pictures. We rebuilt that. That was not there. We rebuilt the inside of the bank to look very much like, based on pictures of what it looked in 1892. This is a Art Deco movie theater, and the individual that owned it was getting to retirement age. The city of Coffeyville, under my leadership, purchased that building. We purchased the adjacent building, which was a car dealership. They had a massive elevator in there to put cars on the second floor, and that building had some unique history in itself. Again, we put new roofs on both of these buildings. We come in and tuck pointed them, secured the windows so that the buildings were weather tight, and then we set up a nonprofit committee to start working on fund drives to restore the inside of the theater. This is the Brown Mansion in Coffeyville. Our historic society had limited resources, and when these columns were getting in bad shape, City of Coffeyville provided the matching funds for them to secure a grant to restore those columns. We helped them build a parking lot, helped maintain it, and through an intercooperation agreement, when the Historic Society was having funding problems, we actually took over their accounting and payroll services so that they could save money for other things to do. The next one, we built a new aquatic center when I was in Coffeyville, and there was a WPA pool right here that we took out. We had about a foot of water we had to make up every day because of the leaks. When we took it out, we were glad that we did. It sat on the side of the hill, and there was a cavity under that, and eventually that large swimming pool probably would have slid down the side of the hill. But in that process, while we were building new, we maintained the PWA era bathhouse with the ideal that we would come back later and make that some kind of recreational or facility for birthday parties, those kinds of things. So even when we built new, we tried to maintain historic elements along with those projects. When I was I spent 8 years in Cali County, and when I was there, there's 1,700 stone arch bridges remaining in the United States. We had 18 of those, and I must have pushed a button. It didn't agree.
It's over.
There we go. There it is. Try not to push that button again.
Turn off, the party's over.
But county government maintained those 18 historic bridges. They weren't on our main highways anymore, and we could have ignored those. But because of their historic significance, we maintained those arch bridges in Cali County. When I was in Catoosa, before I got there, they had about a 24-inch snow, and about half of this roof collapsed. We had to rebuild that museum. We had to box and remove all of the artifacts in that museum and store them, reconstruct it, put all those back. So I just wanted to point out, because maybe not everybody knows, but we have been involved, city staff, in a lot of projects that take great interest and pride in historic restoration, and we do have some experience in that field. From a park project, I just want to point out that we also have experience in parks. While I was in Coffeyville, we had a public golf course that was 9 holes. It was a Perry Maxwell design course. We brought in a architect that specialized in that type of design of golf courses. We expanded it from 18 holes to 18 holes in 1998. In 2001, we went back and did the original 9 and renovated those. City crews built hard surface cart paths for both the original 9 holes as well as the 9-hole expansion. Didn't kill any trees, Joe. And then we did the clubhouse renovation in 2002. We must have done a pretty good job on building a cart path because we did an interlocal agreement with the local country club and built their cart paths for them as well. Again, this is the aquatic center that we built during my tenure with sales tax revenue. Out of electric revenue, the city researched, designed, and built a stadium that seated 5,500 people. It was used by our community college, our high school for football, for soccer. And even this had a historic element to it. We had a building burn in our community that was a Veterans Hall. It was underinsured, so there was no way that that would be rebuilt. So we worked with the local veterans to name this facility Veterans Memorial Stadium. And in the front of this structure, we took columns from the old Veterans Hall and some of the architectural elements and put it into the entrance. And in the planning process to use this parking lot more than just during football season, the plans were eventually to put a softball complex here. During my tenure there, we built Walter Johnson Baseball Field that was used by the high school traveling team in the summer and the community college. We put playground equipment in every major park we had in the community with picnic pavilions for shade and opportunities for people to have picnics that were well received. This was a WPA era road that had been abandoned, and working with one of our local leadership classes, we matched their fundraising with city funds, and we restored that into a walking trail. We built many facilities at our rodeo and fairgrounds to support our interstate fair and rodeo. Just to give you some idea that people that maybe don't know some of the work history of myself and staff, we have done a lot of park projects. Now I'm going to transition and talk about the timeline on the Mineral Wells Park. In July of 2018, we had a public hearing on Mineral Wells Park project. Just in case my eyes aren't good enough to read it up there, if you look at the minutes from that meeting, there were 13 community members in attendance. At that meeting, the council members recommended adding a parking area, benches, and additional shade to the project. So some elements of the park project were requested or directed by the city council. I'd also like to point out that no one pointed out at this hearing in July of 2018 that the park was in the historic district. I know that's staff's fault, but no one on staff was aware that the park was inside the historic district, including the city planner, who was the primary grant writer on the grant and served as the staff person for HPC. Over recent years, there's been multiple park improvements that have been submitted and that have not been submitted to HPC for review in that park. So I think you can understand why there was some confusion. The grant was awarded to the city in November of 2019. We went to the December 4th City Council meeting and presented the grant opportunity.
So that's supposed to be 18? 'Cause we're not,
27 not even here yet.
it should be 18, right?
18.
Again, as I said in advance, you all called me 1,000 times the last 2 weeks on some issues that you're going to discuss later. So yes, that is a typo. In November 27th of 2018, it was awarded. We brought it to council, they accepted. That's when we were told at that meeting in December that made staff aware that the park was in the historic district. This is some examples. When I came here in February of 2017, the city was in the process, they'd already went out for bids and were getting ready to construct a new basketball court in Mineral Wells Park and refurbish the tennis courts. That didn't go to HPC, and that's the first project I was introduced to. So how was I to glean that things in Mineral Wells Park was in the historic district and needed to go to HPC when the city's in the middle of a project, when I first come here as city manager, and nobody even took it to HPC, and HPC did not raise the issue. This road connecting to the rodeo grounds was built without any input. My understanding, this water fountain was put in without going to HPC. I point this out, we have a lot of green fixtures, and in Mineral Wells Park now, and there was one HPC member indicated that they wouldn't support our project because they wanted black benches because that's what they have in Central Park in New York. We thought that was a little far-reaching. We took the project to historic. So we found out in December 4th that it was in the historic district. We took the project to the next meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. We presented the concept plans that we had for the application. Unfortunately for us, that was during a time period when Aaron was out for surgery, so we don't have a tape to go back on this one. But discussion item 1 was discussion and potential action on the proposed mineral wells project. The grant application was written by our city planner, was the predominant author of the grant application. In her staff report, she said the application copy is available on request. It was 97 pages, and staff recommended approval of the project and acceptance of the grant funds. I've heard lately that some people thought that we had not received the grant at that point, that we were asking permission to apply for the grant. No, the grant had been funded. We were asking for permission to construct the project. At that meeting, as I was indicating, Aaron had been out for surgery, so we don't have a tape to go back. Rebecca was in transition to another job in another community and even failed to insert the motion in her draft minutes. We had to come back and amend the minutes later in the June or July timeframe because she left that motion out of the minutes. Without a tape, we're kind of suffering, or we're relying on some sketchy memories. But Dan Cassick communicated with the chairman of the Planning Commission, and he sent an email, and this is what we used to do an addendum to the minutes to show it was approved. The chairman said there were several citizens that attended and spoke in favor of the project. There was discussion, or at least Chairman talked to Rebecca and Leroy about involving HPC in the positioning of the gazebos and some oversight by HPC on designs. If I remember Chairman Chappell expressing those thoughts during the discussion, but I do not recall them being part of the actual motion that was approved. Of course, it's debatable, but I do not recall HPC when they approved the project, requesting the submission of any additional documents or detailed plans. Typically, of my experience with HPC, they're not bashful. And when they want additional documents before they give final approval, it's pretty plain that night that they want more documentation, not 6 months later, that night. Again, miscommunications, and we take part of the responsibility for that. Seems like I'm stuck in place here.
Where's Aaron?
My wheel's not working.
Comes Justin to the rescue.
We wouldn't know what to do without Justin.
That's true.
Subsequent to the HPC meeting, any project that receives federal funding, and the OTRD funds are federal fundings, we have to go through what's called a Section 106 review. This is the letter from SHPO in March. We couldn't even start designing the project or spend any money on it until we went through this review and got final release of the funds. In March, we got the letter from SHPO, and I would point out, SHPO's letter says, we find that there are no historic properties affected by the reference project. So that was SHPO's review of the project. If you'd advance, Justin. Based on the comments from the HPC chairman at the January meeting, city staff has had several communications and meetings with the chairman during the review of the park improvements prior to letting out for bids. Unfortunately, because Joe and I have such a close relationship, he feels comfortable stopping me on the street, stopping by the office. I wished I'd have known that it would be questioned how many visits we had. I had to make better notes, and I will in the future. I'll carry a notebook with me when I'm out walking the streets. But I didn't realize it would be important to document that. If we go forward, Justin. This is an email from July of 2019. The chairman of HPC come to us with a proposal on a company to use for the pavilion. It's one that his family's company uses, and they were very satisfied with it. He thought they would fit in the park. I sent this document to our public works director and our city engineer firm that's designing the project. We picked one out of that book as the design element for our shelters or pavilions, whichever one you call it. Our understanding was the chairman of HPC was comfortable with that and was supportive of that design for the shelters. Justin, if we could advance. Let me try this and see if, Justin, you're stuck there. This is an email from September 20th. And if you'll notice in our concept drawing, there was a pavilion here, a pavilion here, a pavilion there, there, and there. The chairman of the HPC, and working with him on this project, he thought there was too many shelters clustered towards the front of the park and in the vicinity of the large pavilion there. We worked with the chairman of HPC, and we scattered those out and moved them where they were not all clustered together. And even, this is one generation, a second generation, we even moved this one over here and scattered them out further. Next slide, Justin. This is just a note on meeting with the chairman on September 23rd on the project. Again, Justin. So this is, again, conversations between Mr. Chappell and myself, and the chairman says, after conversation on Monday, I spent some time thinking about the changes in mineral wells. I know from our visit that you and Tenny have given a great deal of thought to this whole project, and I appreciate the effort. I still have major concerns about precast concrete curbing, and goes through concerns about the trees and what happened on Main Street when there was sidewalks put on Main Street. And I wasn't here, didn't know about that project, but I didn't think that the two were necessarily correlated. Just because you put sidewalks on Main Street, kill trees, that necessarily would be the same in the park. The chairman went on to say, I do think improvements to park are going to be great for the community. It's my hope that we can get these improvements to keep as much of the park historic charm as possible. and I'd appreciate a chance to visit with you again. I'm out of town until October 7th. Next slide. Again, communication with the chairman. Joe, we're always glad to meet with you. At this point, however, we're planning to move forward with putting the project out for bids. We wanted to get some bids because we knew there was a possibility we may have to make adjustments to the projects once we got those bids in, depending on price. In the communication of the chairman, we have relocated the picnic pavilions away from the historic pavilion and spread them out best we can. We've reduced the total to 5. The existing pavilion will be removed. There's an existing pavilion down by the basketball court. Our goal was, our thought process, we would remove it, use it in another park, and use one of the new ones at that location where there was an existing pavilion, because it would make everything look more uniform. And then we explained to the chairman we were not installing concrete curb and gutter. Our thoughts were, if you used concrete curb and gutter, as the chairman had mentioned in the slide before, that it would be a drainage project and you would be pushing water away from the park. But by not using curb and gutter and using the stop blocks at the end of the parking places, that the same amount of water would get into the park as does today. The water wouldn't go away, it would just go off the paid parking service into the park, rather than be directed away from the park by curb and gutter. And we tried to explain that, and we showed a sample of the stop blocks. Next slide. And then we get a email from the chairman on October 21st, says, since our last visit, I've spent some time studying the Guthrie Historic Preservation Ordinance. It is very clear that any improvements or alterations in Mineral Park must go through HPC process. I know that you believe HPC has already approved the project. I respectfully disagree. HPC only approved conceptual plans. The language in this email is applying to me that even though the project had been approved by City Council, it still had to go be found appropriate by HPC. So again, who's in charge? It also seemed odd to me, while the project was not a secret, everyone knew we were working on it, that no one, including the chairman of HPC, indicated that it needed to go back to HPC from January until October. And all of a sudden in October, when the chairman's disagreeing with us, now it has to go back to HPC, but before then it didn't. And now, again, Joe and I are close friends. We can disagree, and it's like two brothers disagreeing to some point. And I hope you all understand that. I'm not here to lambaste Joe, but we clearly disagree on this.
You're both grounded.
Yeah, well, we most might get reprimanded later. Go to the next slide. So modifications after we open the bid is all this in red because the chairman expressed concerns there's too much paving, it would have an impact on the trees. Originally, we had hard surface paths where you could go to the playground or to the pavilions for multiple directions. We've changed that where you have a hard surface, but it's one directional. And so everywhere you see this red, we have eliminated hard surface walking paths to reduce the amount of hard surface to protect the trees. We eliminated this parking lot. We eliminated this shelter. I visited with the chairman of the HPC and showed him a marked up version of this and told him that we were doing new drawings, and I respectfully requested the chairman prior to the November 4th meeting to table the item at November 4th and allow us to do new drawings that were not scribbled on so that we'd have something to present. Just like any private business, when they ask to table something in the next meeting, that's normally done. The chairman refused to do that. he said that he wanted to go for it and have the discussion, even before we could prepare the revised plans.
Now, the reason for the hard surface was to make sure it's ADA acceptable or available?
Correct, and which we have to meet.
So for wheelchair and other
We can
individuals?
Go to the next slide. This is the revised plan, and you can see it's less busy. There are 3 new, instead of 5, we reduced it to 3 shelters. This is the playground area where the existing playground is, and this is the splash pad that's going over the old wading pool.
So does all this affect, I don't mean I have to jump in real quick, does all this affect the cost of this whole project, obviously?
Well, every
some
time we
degree.
have to design something, we have to go out and measure, we have to have
I'm
new
talking
drawings.
about it reduces it because you've reduced the whole project, right?
Correct. It does affect it to some degree, yes. Okay.
I thought once we got granted.
Because of the chairman's concern, we also went and talked to an arborist, which is a tree specialist. And we talked to a certified arborist. He's preparing this letter. And to summarize this, he told us, when he looked at the plans, looked at the park, he said, look, you got trees down here that have, there's a lot of dead wood in them. They have passed their life expectancy. They need to be removed anyway. That there's too many trees. The canopies are all fighting against each other to survive. And if we're going to do the park appropriately, we should remove the trees that have the dead wood in them and then plant new trees to grow to take their place. That the old trees that are in the process of reaching their life maturity with the dead wood in them are becoming a safety hazard. Limbs are falling out of them. They'll fall on cars. They'll fall on the new equipment. They'll fall on people. So he's recommending that we look at the trees that need to be removed and remove some of those and do new plantings. And we will share that letter with HPC. And he's preparing us a formal letter, and his overall recommendation was that several trees currently should be removed and start over with young, healthy trees. He seemed to be very excited about our project and was excited to see Guthrie trying to take some steps to move forward in a positive manner. Next slide. What everybody needs to remember, HPC looks at it from HPC's perspective. When staff works on it, we got competing or conflicting constraints that we have to navigate and meet. We have directives from the city council, we have input from HPC, we have input from the general public. Of course, we have limited staff and financial resources. We have to meet the American Disability Act. We have to follow public bid law and city purchasing procedures. We can't, just like the private sector, if you say, we want this color, we want it to look this. That's not always possible in a public entity because we have to take a low bid. And so sometimes we can't say, well, we want that one. We have to put it out for bids. We have to follow the guidelines and standards of the grant. And then we have to follow safety standards for playground and splash. So there's a lot of conflicting constraints that city staff gets pulled a lot of different directions in trying to satisfy all these requirements. Next slide. Project timeline going forward. We opened bids on the 25th, and because those bids were higher than we originally thought, we are making some modifications. The bids are good for 45 days till December 9th. Our plans are on December 2nd, HPC meeting. Although we question that you need everything, we are going to give HPC the entire bid specs, construction standards, which will include the water line, the sewer line, everything. And HPC can make themselves happy looking at those 300 or 400 pages of construction standards and documents. Then on December 3rd, we plan to come back to City Council, share with the City Council HPC's input, And then staff will recommend award contracts for all or specific parts of the project. Of course, council has the full range of options. They'll be able to award the contract for all or specific parts of the project. They can reject all bids, and we can request an extension from OTRD and rebid the project at a later date. We can start over, redesign the whole project. We can seek OTRD's approval to relocate the project to another location, or we can just simply cancel the project. All those are available to us. Staff just wants somebody to be in charge to tell us, hey, this is what you're going to do. After all the inputs, that somebody's got to have final word. Yes, sir.
Well, it looks to me like the project's already been completely redesigned from what we approved.
There's been a lot of modifications
How
to
come,
trying
I
to
mean,
make.
you'd think we'd see that during the process.
Well, staff, I didn't know that you would ask that question, but staff has brought the project back multiple times to city council and made presentations. So you have seen some of that.
We have seen some, but,
Yes,
you know,
but not
I mean, the
all.
entire project has changed from what we approved, is what I'm saying.
Not entirely. I
A lot.
mean, it has had changes, location, but the same elements, but they've been moved around. The chess pieces have been moved, same chess pieces.
Well, I thought
Rook's
once we
still
got
there.
grant money, we had to stay with our original plan.
We have to stay within certain guidelines. There is flexibility. And we have been working with the.
But can we
OT
still use our in-kind on this new redesign?
Yes. And OTRD, we have communicated with them. They're okay with the changes that we made. So the granting inning's okay. And the reason you haven't seen the last one is because now we would have introduced it tonight and presented it to you tonight to recommended changes, but we want to go back to HPC one last time, give them another opportunity to comment on the latest edition or draft before we bring it back to you.
Do you have a slide of what we approved originally? With the
The concept
equipment
plan,
and
the
everything else?
first one I showed, what was approved and what was the grant application was built around. And it is the one that was approved by city council. It was the one that was approved by OTRD. It has the same elements. It has an aquatic center, has not changed, location's not changed. I mean, splash pad. It has the same playground equipment that's
Railroad
never
theme?
moved.
The railroad theme?
Yes.
Okay.
Same thing, railroad theme for the splash pad. Same shelters. They've been moved to a different location, then spread out, and cart pass and parking. So some of the chess pieces have moved, but it's basically the same project.
I got another question. I was out there a couple weeks ago, just driving through, because someone had said something to me about a gazebo that's existing out there, and I'd never seen it before for all the tall grass, and so I started looking for it. My daughter and I were driving by, and said, there it is, Dad. So we drove back to it, and we looked at it, and it's really, really cool. And I'm just wondering why we're not staying with that same design. I mean, if we've got the actual prototype of what was there, why?
Cost
Okay.
is one thing, and the other is the detail of construction that would be involved, and then making that larger for picnic area would.
Well, that
would
was just
present
got the
difficulties.
spring bubbling out of it.
Correct.
Which is
Right. It
really
was-
cool.
yes.
And we ought to really
Yes.
highlight that.
What we went with our design of the pavilions was something more complementary of the large pavilion that sits in the center of the park,
Okay.
and trying to use roof
More in
lines
that
and stuff.
style of building, so
Correct.
wood construction, frame construction?
Correct,
Okay.
Now, the bid is good until the December 9th.
correct.
Does the grant have any kind of time stipulation on it?
Yes, but we have worked on these grants before, and we can, if need be, we can get extensions.
Okay, so that's not an issue.
No, we're not concerned about that. I would point out, I've got a few more slides if you bear with me, on the historic preservation ordinance, on section 11, certificate of appropriateness applications. Applications for construction, alteration, restoration, and removal signs including sandwich boards. That goes through the process. Then you get to number 2, all other applications for certificates of appropriateness shall be accompanied by the following documents when relative. City staff and/or the commission will determine which documents are relative to the application in question. Again, you got 2 partners, 2 players. There's nobody that's in that sentence that says, okay, what if staff and the commission disagrees? Who makes the decision? So again, another place for conflict. Section 12, certificate of appropriateness, general provisions and procedures. It's not the intent of this section to limit new construction to any one period or architectural style, but to preserve the integrity of historic and architectural resources. It is the intent of this section to ensure compatibility of new construction by approving only new or infill construction that is compatible to adjacent properties and approving only additions to existing resources that are compatible with the property in question. In the definition, section 4, compatibility is defined as capable of existing together in harmony. If we go to the next slide. Under the guidelines, which is a supplement to the ordinance, local, state, and federal laws and policies may affect decisions for changes within the historic district. Projects must comply with the American Disability Act, Guthrie Code, Guthrie Historic Preservation Ordinance, the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation. Of course, this is not a rehabilitation project, and other regulatory documents. So even in the ordinance, it's recognized that there are other rules like the American Disability Act that have to be met. And number 5, new construction. Recommendations for new construction include new designs are not to create a false historic appearance. So you're not supposed to try to go back and make it look just like it did in 1890. Infill construction is to be contemporary yet compatible with the historic character of neighboring buildings and the historic district in terms of size, scale, designing, detail, material, color, and texture. We think we've achieved that. Next slide. Again, the ordinance that we introduced tonight, the change is how we determine appropriateness. And again, you get back to the triangle. Who's on top? Who makes the final decision? And this ordinance would clearly state that the city council is the final sole discretion on whether the project gets built or not. Next slide. There are a lot of trigger words and phrases in our ordinance now that makes confusion. For example, in section 12, it says no permit for building, sign, demolition, or house moving shall be issued by the city for any resource located within a historic district, designed or landmark site until the application for such a permit has been reviewed by the commission and a certificate of appropriateness approved by the commission. Many times, HPC tells us that is the trump card, and they have to give a certificate of appropriateness no matter what city council told us before we can build something. Under section 10, work requiring review by the city. The provisions of this ordinance shall likewise apply to any resource that is designated, and then you go on, or located within a historic district, which is owned, leased by a public entity to the extent permitted by law. Again, that's another trump card that gets played a lot. So there's a lot of provisions in that ordinance that we get told as city staff, no, we have to approve. It doesn't matter what city council says. We got to approve it before you can build it. If you go on. The section in the ordinance by reviewing documents that city staff determine are relevant to such public improvement review. If we could go to the next slide. Again, if you look at the section on certificate of appropriateness, it says city staff and/or commission will determine which documents are relevant to the application in question. Who makes the decision if it is a disagreed upon? It should either say the commission or city staff. The only thing that really bothered me is when I heard some people were saying city staff wanted to change this provision because we wanted to be able to hide things from the HPC. And I would challenge anybody to provide us an example of past practice where staff has done that. I think that's an outlandish statement. If we could go on, Justin. Okay, that's the end of my presentation, and I will end it with this thought. I believe I've made my concerns clear tonight. I know that the city council has other significant issues to deal with yet tonight and the balance of the agenda. Therefore, to allow more discussion and time to work through these issues between council, staff, and HPC, I would gladly recommend that this item be tabled to a future meeting where we can have some other discussion with the HPC council. But I thought it was important to clarify some of the timelines, how much involvement through their chairman that HPC's had on this project, and get that out so that everybody's aware of that. And then hopefully we can have a series of meetings and come up with something we can all agree to on who is the hierarchy, who makes the final decision, and how the process is supposed to work.
You're talking
Thank
about a
you.
workshop? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't use that word, but
I did.
you did.
Yes.
And that is possible.
We're getting there.
Joe, I don't know that I've got your name on the list here. Actually, I don't. Oh, yeah, it is. It is here.
You're not signed up,
It is
Joe.
here. It says that you can speak for 1 minute. No, I'm kidding on that.
I won't be as long as Leroy. And I'm a better friend to him than he is to me.
You need, please identify yourself and your address.
I'm Joe Chappell, and I'm chairman of the Historic Commission. I didn't plan to speak tonight because I didn't even bring my notebook, which several of the councilmen have seen. But I do want to address a couple of things. I didn't even take notes, so I will be way briefer than Leroy was. But anyway, when we approved, and there's confusion about, times, but in January, and I wish I had my notebook, may not be good with dates, but in January when the HP approved the concept, I was totally against it initially. When Rebecca brought it to my attention, I went to her office and I said, that park's sort of pristine and it's historical and it's just sort of a little jewel. And anyway, through conversation with her, and she said, I was told, and I know for a fact that I was told that it was a conceptual plan to apply for the grant. I don't know if that fits in with Leroy's timeline or not, but that's what I was told. And I know that in my paperwork that's at home, if I'd known Leroy's presentation would have been that long, I could have gone home and got it. But in my paperwork, everything in that first presentation was conceptual, proposed. We had no inclination that that was it, that was our final look at it. And Leroy can say that all HPs are nosy and they come back and they push and they want to find out what's going on. That didn't happen. I didn't know when the grant had been granted. I didn't know how much I didn't remember how much the grant was for. And when there were several times that I poked my head in Leroy's office and he always welcomed me in. And I shared with him some ideas that I had. Now, our first, what I call sit-down official meeting, which he placed up there, Tinny was there, and Tinny brought all of his, paperwork, and it seemed very formal. And my first comment was, when you bring this back to planning, we can discuss some things.
Planning or HP?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm on planning too. I'm actually planning representative on HP. I asked, when he brought it back to HP, we could discuss some of these things. And he immediately told me that as long as he was the city manager of Guthrie, that it would not be brought back to HP. That's a quote. And I remember being sort of shocked by it, but honest to God, I didn't know if that wasn't the case, that as city manager, he could do that. You never really read your ordinances until you need them, okay? So, and at that time, he asked me for some suggestions. He asked me what color the benches should be. And I said, well, at the turn of the century, I don't know that they had green, and I think maybe they should be black. And I walked over to the window and looked at I can't even say the word now, I'm so.
Apothecary garden?
Apothecary
Yeah,
garden.
the garden, and I pointed to the bench. And then I expressed some concerns. I expressed several concerns because I thought, well, if we're done here, then I will try to get as many things that I think are important in the park. And I did talk to Leroy even after that. And then I left for Mexico. And when I was in Mexico, I wrote that letter that I still had some concerns. And when I received his reply that said, we're always happy to sit down with you, Joe, but we're going to apply for the bids. I remember being shocked by that at the time because I just didn't know that it was that far along. And granted, it was a long time from January to August or September when we started talking about this, but I just assumed that it would, it was brought to HP. It'll be brought back to HP at some point. So then I researched my ordinance. I highlighted everything that I thought proved that this project should have input and oversight from HP. I've shared that with some of the council. And I wrote Leroy a letter. It had been January since we'd heard anything on the commission about this project. I wrote Leroy a letter that basically said, and you saw it up there, that I had read the ordinance, and it was pretty clear to me that the ordinance was clear that that this falls under the auspices of HP. And I said that working together, I think that we can do, I was excited about the project. I think that we could do some great things. And Leroy's response was, I will have the city attorney review the ordinance. That was it, period. Also in that letter, I stated that I wanted to have the meeting, that I wanted the park put on HP's agenda. So I reached out to Dan, and I told Dan, first in an email, and then he asked me if it
That
was
was a
something.
5-minute timer, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you're going to enforce it, I'll sit down. But I'm almost through. So I will come in like 35, 40 minutes less than what you heard from Leroy. So then, where was I in my long story?
I'm
You
sorry.
had it on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yes,
Get it on the agenda.
I requested it be put on the agenda. I emailed Dan, and he emailed me back and asked, is something specific or general? And I just asked for it to be a conversation about the park project. Well, I called Dan, as I remember it, and Dan said, well, I really don't understand because you've already approved the plan. So I felt like I was, these are my memories. I remember thinking, well, okay, so this is the narrative that I'm going to get from staff. We approved the plan. And then, after I'd outlined all those things, I did go by Leroy's office. Before our meeting, 2 weeks before our meeting, Leroy called me and asked me to remove the park from the agenda. I don't have my notes here, but I've got this written down, and I've shared this with some people.
Our agenda is-
Okay.
Joe,
Help me.
let me.
Help me back. No, but I just want to get through this
Okay.
because it's going to, I'm sorry it's as long as it is.
No, I was gonna
But,
make a suggestion.
So I had it put on the agenda, and Leroy called me and asked me if I would take it off of the agenda. And I said, Leroy, no, I really feel like, that it needs to be put on. And Leroy said, well, if you're going to do that, I'm just going to limit your conversation to colors. And that's literally what you told me, Leroy. You said you would limit our conversation to colors. And then at the end of the conversation, he said, well, if you want it on the agenda, that's your meeting, you can do what you want to do. And he said, we'll just have our little pissing contest on Monday, and you have a good day. And that was the end of that conversation. So a week later, he called me again and asked me to take it off the agenda. And he told me that Rebecca had made some mistakes in the, not mistakes, but she left some things out. At some point in this, too, I will say that we talked about the sidewalks. I was concerned about the trees. I asked about the playground foundation because I was concerned about all the concrete foundations throughout the park. I brought that up. That was used against me many times, I felt like, in the conversations that I've heard, that they even want to control what's under the playground. But it was just my concern for the trees. And it seems like I was acting unilaterally here, but it wasn't. I didn't feel like I was. I was just looking out for the park. And I wasn't trying to bypass my, I started sharing. Once I realized what I felt like was happening, that HP was literally being ignored, and the new concept that Leroy has up here, for the, the pyramid and all that, he was using that pyramid in January, as far as I'm concerned. Also to address the fact that you don't have control over what we do. Anything that we don't have a certificate of appropriateness for can be appealed to you, I imagine by the city manager as well, and we can certainly be overruled. You have that power now. I've got one more. The last time he asked me to take it off the agenda, he told me that Rebecca had left some things off of the budget, so that the sidewalks were not going to be there anymore. Oh, one other thing. I don't think I said this because I think this was important. And if I said this, forgive me. But when he called me the first time to ask me to take it off the agenda, and he told me he would limit it to colors, he also told me, because the only request that I ever felt like anything that I had mentioned, the only thing was that a gazebo had been moved. But when he called me the first time to ask me to take it off the agenda, he told me that, well, we'll just move the gazebos back to the pavilion, near the pavilion. So I felt bullied during most of the situation. Excuse me. I was so disturbed that I was here without my notes. This is nearly the end. So, so some of the things had been removed, and he, as he stated, he wanted me to take it off the agenda so that they could come up with a new plan to bring to us. Now, we haven't talked about this park since January, and I've had felt that HP was being pushed away. I didn't want to take it off. I wanted us to have a discussion about it. During this period of time, too, I was communicating with the other commissioners and telling them my concerns. But some of the things had been left off the budget, and they were going to work on a new plan, and it would be better if we waited till the plan was done. And I said, Leroy, I just feel like it'd be better if we could have a meeting and all of the commission could discuss what their concerns and thoughts are about the park. I just think it's unfortunate that after we met in January and after the city became aware that this was a historic district, that we didn't have 5 or 6 meetings between, we had meetings, you know, we had HP meetings where we discussed fonts and colors, which we tend to do. But anyway, I also found out during this period of time, and, you know, I love Guthrie. I think everybody that knows me knows that. I think this project needs to be done right. I don't think it has to be done right now. I know that the completion date, that we don't have to have this done until May of 2022. I just want it done right. And I feel like, you know, I feel a little bit like a victim in all this, honestly, because I just want to, I worked with Leroy on Halloween. I'll tell you this. Halloween day, I called Leroy and I asked to meet with him because I didn't want to have a pissing contest.
We better start using a different word.
Okay, I'm sorry. You can write me up.
Just a contest, we'll know what it means.
Anyway, I'm sorry that I'm saying, and I appreciate that, and I apologize to everybody, but that's what was said. So I went by Leroy's office on Halloween, and I walked in and I said, Leroy, you know, I don't want to be against you. I want to be for you. I want to work with you. I said, I was on the planning commission when we worked on the accessory buildings. We had workshops. He listened to input from all of the commissioners, and why this wasn't that way, I couldn't figure out for the life of me. But that's the way it is, and that's the way I remember it. So
Okay.
that's,
Thank you,
yeah,
Joe.
and I'll take any questions.
I got a statement I was going to make.
Yes.
I'm going to be making a motion to table this, and I'm going to be requesting 2 scenarios go to workshop. First off, the entire park needs to come back to workshop on one scenario or multiple workshops, whatever it is. And then the second thing is the whole hierarchy of command here on what is the council supposed to look at with regards to with the changes that we have here in this little section. I'm tabling all of it at this point.
But you know, to me, this is just my opinion. It should die on its merit. You guys have the right to appeal anything that we do. All we are is making recommendations to you.
We have that right at the present time.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly right.
You have that right.
It's necessary to
Right. So,
make that
but-
And yeah, maybe there was bad communication, and maybe I failed in many ways to not, you know, maybe the first time I heard that it wasn't going to come back to HP, I should have done my research right then. But I'm generally a person that likes to work with people. I'm not confrontational by nature, and I didn't feel confrontational until I read the ordinance and understand it. That ordinance has worked for us for 20 years. I don't think it needs to be tabled. I think we need to move forward. I don't think that city staff should ever be able to decide what's relevant, what a board or commission gets. I think they should be able to, you know.
So let me back up.
Excuse me, Brian.
That's just.
Leroy asked
And
for some.
certainly, I'm not telling anybody what to do.
Okay. Leroy wanted a clarification comment.
Yes.
We'll hug later.
Pardon me?
We'll hug later.
Okay. I can
'Cause
hug you now.
And clearly, our memories are different. But I respect your opinion. and hopefully you can respect mine. I did want to point one clarification. There is an appeal process, but if you go read that appeal process, it's like many things in an ordinance. It is not clear and does not say that the city council can overturn it. they can send it back to HPC.
That's not the way that's not the way.
Well, I think
I remember
there's a couple different things going on. I mean, I hear in your presentation, verbal, and Leroy's presentation up there, that we want the park, that the project is a good thing for our community. Then we get to this very fragile thing that we call communication. And how do we best communicate? And how do we make that happen? I'm speaking just as one member of this council when I say I think I want the input from the Historic Preservation Commission on this particular project and other projects. But I also think that there are trigger words, and you and I have talked about that, in the ordinance that can be interpreted that you don't go any further on a project unless you have an approval by the commission. And just a minute. And I think we need to clarify that. And not just for us, but for posterity. Or 10 years from now, they're going to be sitting here debating about the same thing. And I don't think we need to reinvent that. So I think we need to take a look at that, and I think we need to, we, the council, and we, the commission, need to get together and have some dialogue about that.
Okay, I'm just going to say one more thing, if I can remember what I was going to say.
Well, you don't have your notes.
And I don't think I said this, but this is how I felt. You know, when I sent my letter that said I'd read the ordinance and I understood how it worked, and when Leroy responded that he would have the city attorney review it, to me it felt like the city attorney reviewed it, saw that I was correct, and all of a sudden there's a new amendment to the ordinance to change the way we play the game. And that's how I see it, and that's all I got to say.
Okay.
I'm going to make a motion to table this thing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
wanna get
Is
more
there any
people
other
to talk out
discussion?
here.
I see her.
Okay.
Any other discussion at council?
You can still discuss.
I know. Okay.
We want to talk, fine. I'm not trying, we're not trying to get in anybody's way. I'm sorry. If you guys want to talk, talk.
I've got a list of about 6 people here, maybe more. I don't know if we want to take up more. Come on forward. Adam, I had you down first, but no, Lynn, you're not.
You're still waiting, Lynn.
Sorry, Lynn.
Okay.
Me first. Me first.
Okay, Aaron, go ahead.
All right. I'm Erin Brown, volunteer for the Historic Preservation Committee, historian and curator at the Oklahoma Territorial Museum, where I've been there for 11 years. I serve on the committee as the special knowledge slot. Based on my education, my experience, and my access to the historic materials at the Territorial Museum. I didn't know we were going to be talking about Mineral Wells Park tonight. Otherwise, I would have brought my 45-page thesis on the history of the park for everybody to be familiar with. So I view it as my responsibility to not only provide information to the Preservation Committee members, but to the City Council with any information that may be relevant for the topics up for discussion. 2 side notes. The point in July 2018 that nobody brought to the attention that it was not a historic landmark, it was not in the district, that is wrong. I did it every single opportunity to anybody who would listen. And in January and February, when we gave the support for the grant, we asked specifically if we would be able to continue the conversation during the modifications throughout the process, through the grant process. And we were told yes. And that is the only thing that the HP committee is asking for, is to be a part of the continuing conversation. All right, with problems with the amendment. Guthrie is a certified local government with a SHPO, according to the National Historic Preservation Act. Having a functioning Historic Preservation Committee is a key component mandated by the state and federal regulations. And it is supposed to be composed of a variety of individuals with specific training and experience. They're supposed to be the subject matter experts for you guys, so that you guys don't have to drill down into every bit of the nitty-gritty details. That's our job, for us to make the recommendations that get sent to you for then you guys to continue on doing all of the things that you do. We're supposed to be helping you. So the hierarchy is clearly stated already. It is clearly stated in the Certified Local Government Program, of which I put up 7 copies there. It's clearly stated in the SHPO ordinances. It is clearly stated in our ordinance. We haven't ever had a problem with it. I don't see why we have a problem with it now. So this amendment is problematic because the wording that it has in it puts at risk the certified local government status that Guthrie holds. And that came directly from the SHPO office this afternoon on the telephone call that I had with them. That language does not work, and we will lose that status. And if you don't know what the certified local government status allows us, it allows us access to state and federal grant monies, aid programs, et cetera. And losing that, that's something that we have fully taken advantage of in the past, and that would be like shooting ourselves in the foot. It's not a good idea. 2, even if for projects of which the city doesn't think is relevant to go through the HP committee, you are still going to have to go through the SHPO Section 106 review process according to the National Historic Preservation Act. And again, all that is already clearly outlined by numerous documentations in numerous places. And if you would like me to send you links so you can do research, I will send you a whole page in an annotated bibliography. It is 3 pages long, and it's over 1,000 pages worth of reading. But again, that is what the HP committee is supposed to do. We're supposed to be your subject matter experts. 2, for those grants and aid programs that don't require CLG status, they will still show preferential treatment to statements of support by an HP committee. So this amendment is not necessary and potentially problematic. And if the city, the staff, the HP committee is unclear on the hierarchy, then we should have, and absolutely should have, SHPO come and teach us all.
Okay.
So wait, before you go, comment.
Yes.
When I said I'm going to table this, that's exactly the reason I'm going to table this.
No,
But let me finish. The reason I'm going to table it is because this whole park that I'm seeing up here is totally different than what we approved as a council. And so what I'm tabling is not only this, but I'm tabling the entire park project to come back to a workshop.
Are they not 2 different things?
It's kind of all woven together at this point and convoluted.
The amendment, I
Joe,
don't
I know
think
that
is
you want it to be 2 different things. But I don't know, because here's what's happened. We made an approval on a park. Okay, that is nothing, that park looks nothing like what we approved at this point. So, no, they're not 2 different things.
Okay.
They're weaved at this point, because the entire project's been changed.
Okay.
So that's why I'm tabling it to bring it back.
Okay.
Well, you have a motion to table.
A motion.
Let me,
It may not even go
ensure
through
that.
the vote.
Okay, so for,
But that's the reason for me anyway, is because this whole thing is nothing like what we originally did.
okay.
I think and I know that there's a number of other people that at least had listed their names here as wanting to speak. After these presentations and after the motion, which was also seconded, I think it would be better to have that dialogue at that point where we can really focus our time and maybe do a lot more communication between now and then.
And it gives you a chance to give us more input.
And get your notes and everything else.
Yeah, so I don't want to close out anybody that had signed up, but that's where I'm kind of headed right now. If anybody, I know you had your hand up there that you had to speak, and okay, Aaron, we understand. But the other people that have, I want to give you the opportunity, but if you feel comfortable with saving your comments for whether it be a workshop or whatever, another opportunity to discuss this, and as well as have discussion offline between now and then if you feel comfortable with that, we will hold that until we have that other opportunity, which is the motion is on the floor to do.
Okay.
Is that okay? Does anybody else have? Okay. Lynn, okay. Identify yourself, address.
My name is Lynn Bilodeau. I live at 215 South 2nd Street. Just want to say how much I love living in the city of Guthrie. I've made that comment many times before. Told Leroy right before this meeting how lucky we are to have Leroy as our city manager. I appreciate Leroy and everything he does here. Joe Chappell is my friend. I appreciate everything Joe does. A lot of this has just been miscommunication between them. The only thing I'm going to address, and I actually signed up for 2 things, but this is the only thing I'm going to address, just in case the motion to table it doesn't get passed and you end up voting on this ordinance. The ordinance amendment that has been proposed as written goes way beyond anything you guys need to do. When I got my first job making $1.75 an hour and I got my first check, I was appalled at what came out of my check for this stuff called Social Security. I was even more appalled when I found out that Congress opted themselves out of that Social Security system. So they weren't paying Social Security taxes, but I was. Now, fortunately, Congress came to their senses in 1984. And you hear the statement a lot of times, perception is reality. If you guys amend this ordinance like this, you are opting the city out of what you're asking every citizen to follow.
Amen.
And that's wrong. That's like the parent that says, don't do as I do as I say. That's not good parenting. That's not good governing. There is no chance, the HPC's the tail, the city council's the dog. We're not going to be able to wag the dog. You guys, and I know there's some trigger words, you were talking about some things. If a citizen has the right to appeal, or the city manager or the city attorney has the right to appeal to the council, that brings with it the right to get a result different from what was done before. So yeah, they can appeal to the city council. You know, don't opt the city out and tell all the citizens, but you guys still, if you live in the historic district, you have to follow the system, but we don't.
All right.
Well,
Thank you.
and again, I would like to have everybody in these workshops as well. So, I mean,
Okay.
I think it's a good thing.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay. Adam?
My name is Adam Ropp. I live at 910 East Cleveland Avenue. I practically live in the Temple. My wife and I also own the Guthrie Depot, which is one of the prized jewels of the town, not because I own it, but because of what it is. And I'm also a Historic Preservation Commissioner as well. My question, though, is if we're tabling it, does that mean you can bring it back later, right?
We're tabling it for whether it be a workshop or another opportunity to discuss with the Historic Preservation Commission 2 issues.
Let me clarify, because I think there's some confusion on what I'm trying to table here. This thing's getting tabled, or the motion is to table this whole ordinance. But in conjunction with bringing back the entire park plan to workshop with HP, whoever wants to be there, the whole deal, because it's completely different than what we approved. I mean, it's kind of like approving, a candy cane and you end up with an orange.
Right. I don't care about the park right now.
Yeah, so-
I don't care about the park at all. What I care about is in this amendment, which is about.
That's what's on the agenda.
That's
Right.
what's on the
That's what's
agenda.
We're
on
not
the
talking
agenda.
about the park right now, we're talking about an amendment. And
Right.
that amendment pertains to everything.
Right.
It
Correct.
pertains to other buildings in town.
Right.
It pertains to the park. It has nothing to do with the park.
Right, well.
It's an amendment
It's
which is
more
about.
generic than
Right.
the park.
So it's separate. We're not voting about you guys aren't voting on the park. You're voting on what power you have. So
That's the
don't hide
agenda
behind the
item.
guys.
We already have the
about the
power.
park.
Yeah, no,
We already have
that's
the
already
power.
there.
We already
But
know that.
The reason I'm tabling this is to formally, not just table this, but to bring the park back. Because if I don't bring the park back in this vote, I don't know what's going to happen to it. Okay, so the park's got to be part of this process.
But the tabling is on this agenda item.
Right.
And the agenda item is not the park.
Right.
The
It is on
agenda
this
the agenda item is the amendment.
Right, to a workshop that,
Does that answer your question, Adam?
Yes, it
that
does.
help?
Thank you.
Okay.
And I had something else I wanted to say, but I was just want to get a question across
Okay.
because you guys are wanting
All right.
to vote on
Okay.
it. Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Very good. All right.
you'll be
so
invited to all of that.
We
now.
have a motion and a second, and we've completed our discussion. Please submit your votes. See the votes. By a vote of 6-1 to table this item on the agenda, which is the amendment, proposed amendment for further dialogue, future dialogue, and possible workshop. Item number 5, discussion and possible action to appoint following individuals to CVB, Convention and Visitors Bureau. A is the opportunity from the 2 councilmen from Ward 3 to appoint an individual to the CVB. Do you have a nomination, representatives?
Yeah, Robert Moses
I'll
for
second.
Ward 3.
Okay, there's a, Robert Moses has been nominated, and there's a second. Any discussion? Submit your votes. See the votes. Unanimous approval to add Mr. Moses to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Item B, at-large position. I am nominating Caitlin Schwanger to continue on as a member of the CVB.
Motion to approve?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any
We have
discussion?
one point of clarification. Which term are, because the terms are different on the 2 that are available.
She is at the at-large, first one,
B is a partial term, C is a full term.
full term.
Full term.
So
Full
you're doing
term.
C first.
C, I'm sorry.
C.
Full term,
We'll need to pull it back then.
The full term, C.
full term.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Is that agreeable with the motion and the second? Okay?
Yes.
All right. Submit your votes, please. See the votes. By a vote of 5-2, Ms. Schwanger is a member, a continuing member of the CVB. Item number B, I would propose Joshua Stratton as a member. He's got an outstanding background in marketing. He's was head of marketing for the Cabela's in Oklahoma City. He's relatively new here in Guthrie, but in my interviewing of all of the candidates, I considered him a very, well, I consider him a rock star with the comments, the responses that he made to me. So I would nominate Joshua to be a member of the CVB under item B.
So
Is there a
moved.
second?
Oh, well, I'll second
Motion.
it. If you're making the motion,
I'll make a motion.
second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Who all did you interview?
I interviewed all of them,
All of them?
all 5.
All 5.
Yep. Okay? Okay, submit your votes. See the votes. Unanimous approval of Joshua Stratton to be a member of the CVB for that partial term. Item number 6, discussion, potential action on the ethics violation complaint against Councilman Long submitted by Councilman Thomas pursuant to the Code of Ethics for elected and appointed officials. I'd like to ask our attorney, Billy Wheeler, if he would just comment a little bit about the process that we will be going through here.
I would propose that you guys agree to a process. The process would be that the debate would include Councilman Long, and any vote at the end of this, if any motion is made, that he would abstain from that vote for a conflict of interest.
Okay? So Councilman Long can stay here and be a part of the dialogue, but would not be voting on this agenda item. You've heard myself, as well as Councilman Long, speak about the Code of Ethics and the challenge that we had in 2 weeks ago. It certainly wasn't our best hour. And Councilman Thomas has asked that we discuss different options resulting from that, that behavior.
Well,
Councilman Thomas?
it's the role of the council by the Code of Ethics that we are self-enforcing, we police ourselves. Therefore, it's not up to me to say that was a great apology and I accept it and withdraw everything because that's a council decision. So therefore, that's why I think that the council has to make that decision, not me. But I think that the things that happened were pretty obvious and clear, and the apology was heartfelt, I believed, and I believe, from what I saw tonight, this city's capable of good conduct, as Leroy pointed out, when we had opportunity tonight for a whole bunch of people to go off the rails, and nobody did. And so we could, I think we can do better, and we've shown it tonight pretty well that we can. I just hope we continue to stay on that trajectory. But we do need to talk about what we do, and I'll just stop and let you guys jump in.
Okay.
Personally, I thought that, I think that what we do is kind of what we've done to a degree. James and I have had a conversation right after that happened, and multiple ones after that. I think that, he did exactly what he told me he was going to do, and I accept his apology. And I think that you're right, Z. I think this council is capable of acting in a professional manner, and we are. I do feel that we need to pull this item as a council member. That's going to be my recommendation, because I do feel that a reset is in order in this particular scenario, and that I don't think you're going to find, this hasn't happened on a council I've been on in the past, and I don't think we're going to find it happening in the future.
Was that a motion, or you just recommending, or what?
Well, I'm having an open conversation right at this point.
Oh.
But this did happen on another council, and
Well,
it was done. It was done.
Not a council that I was part of, or we were, the majority of this council was part of.
Yeah, we had the same scenario where the vice mayor wrote a letter to the mayor.
Right.
It seems precedent setting that that's the way it's going to be if we're going to address this stuff. But it seems that he wrote the letter, she made an apology, and he withdrew it. And I view that as wrong. I believe the council should make a decision. I think withdrawing it is wrong. We need to make a decision. Is there a violation or not? We need to say so.
Well, I think
That doesn't require necessary action other than just saying.
Well, the action could be just what he said. I accept the apology. That's good enough.
Yeah, I think clearly, again, it wasn't our best hour, it wasn't my best hour, I made comment of that at the beginning. And we all make mistakes, and I hope that we learn from those. And I think clearly, we as a council, as Jim said when I was making my comments, we all should have done something a little bit different, probably that day. And that's easy to say when you're looking in the rearview mirror. But we learn from it, and we go forward, and we become better for it. And I hope that's true. And if it's not true, then the next opportunity we get to police ourselves, we take maybe take more definitive action. But I would think that this isn't a time for taking some kind of deliberate action. That's just me speaking.
Well, and that's kind of, I don't think it's taken away from what's already been, yes, there was infractions, no question. The whole night was an infraction. I can cite multiple infractions amongst multiple people that happened. And so, but with the apology and the conversations that I've had, and I beg that, that other councilmen would have had similar conversations with James as well. And there is a time and a place in my world for a reset. Well, not a constant reset, a one-time reset on something. Just like there is with my family, there's a time for a reset. We've had these conversations. And so my opinion is that it's acknowledged, it's already out there public. My comment that it didn't happen on the past council wasn't meaning that it didn't ever happen. It never happened with Taylor, you, Steve, and me on a council. The majority of this council who's been on a council for 4 years prior, it never happened. And so, granted, it happened prior to that. And so my motion is to eliminate the letter, is what the motion I'm going to make at this point.
Can I make a comment
And,
before you
but
do
that's
that?
just going to be my motion. You make any comment you want.
I think that James is, I'm sorry.
Is there a second to that? And then there would be discussion.
I'll second it.
Okay, now we have discussion. Go ahead.
I think James is truly remorseful for what he did. And I think we all got something to learn here. I mean, because every one of us was in violation of that code of ethics, not just James. We had an obligation to say something, Steve, you said so, and you're right. And so every one of us is in violation of the code of ethics, not just James. We had an obligation and we failed miserably. And we had a horrible meeting because of it, and now we're sitting here talking about it. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I think Kaylin has heard from James, and I think she's probably accepted what he's had to say. Because there's nothing, I mean, what else can you do? I mean, at this point, the bad part about this is, and I said this to James earlier, no matter how sincere he is in his apology, because of these charges that are brought against him, it's going to look like he's trying to get out of trouble instead of say, I'm sorry. And that's the problem I see with this. You know, and
Jim, you and I have talked about that, and I disagree with you on that, and you know that, because I knew he was apologizing when I wrote the letter. I wrote it in the letter that I knew that.
Right.
So it does not look like we forced him to apologize. He did that on his own.
I'm just saying that we've all violated the same code of ethics, is all I'm saying.
What would,
And taking it out on one man when we've all been in violation of the same code of
But-
ethics seems kind of strange to me.
Do I get a free pass later?
well,
No.
no, you don't.
No.
No, but here's the.
None of us do.
And I understand your position too, Z. I really, truly do, because it's just like when you do a reprimand, you do the reprimand. But at the end, I mean, what is this, if we left the letter in play here, what does that do? What does that look like? Versus pulling it, and giving a one-time reset. I mean, that's what I want to know. I'm confused of what that looks like, because I've never had to experience this on a council before.
You're talking about a one-time reset. We've talked ever since I've been back on the council, reminding people of the code of ethics. How many times has that been a minor reset? We've not done anything. We've just reminded people over and over. We got a code of ethics, you know. You remember the code of ethics that you signed? We've done it several times, reminding people about it, and then we just went way overboard last time. And so I actually think we need to do something other than say, free pass for everybody. Do not, you know.
And what would that be?
Well, just acknowledge that there were violations and accept as violation. And if you want to do something else, I mean, we haven't even discussed the violations. They're in the letter. But, you know, the one I didn't really talk about the most kind of hit me just recently, that he's on the Historic Preservation Committee. One of the things we can do is remove someone from a committee. And I don't know that he belongs on there when he's causing all the problems and yelling at them and taking it out against them. He thinks they're idiots or something, is what he said, pretty much.
I don't think he said that.
Well, I'm paraphrasing.
Yes, you are.
I'm paraphrasing because I don't want to say some of the things that were said, but he did not get along well with them at all. He was supposed to represent them, and Jim sat here at the meeting last time and said, "Where is somebody from here? Why aren't they here?" And Jim sat here and James sat here and didn't say a word. And he was on the commission, but he didn't represent the only commission that the commission
I
he's
want
on.
to say, and just, James, I'm just going to say that James was not on the commission at the beginning of this process, so he didn't, I don't think he
Yeah,
was fully.
we understand. We
I'm
understand
talking
that.
about the flags.
Yeah.
He was on during the flags.
Yeah, it was a different, it wasn't parked. It wasn't parked. Jeff?
Out on the wall, I think, isn't that our signatures out there that says that we won't do anything?
That's the ethics.
That's the ethics code, okay.
Yeah, that's what that is.
Reaffirm that.
I didn't hear that comment.
His code is out on the wall out there.
Yes.
We all signed off on it.
We all signed it.
And said that we wouldn't say anything or do anything. Now, I'm going to accept his apology too. I think he's sincere in how he said it and the way he said it. I'm hoping that Caitlin is thinking the same thing, because I respect her ideas of what, we had a great meeting last night. So, I'm not here to point fingers, but I'm like him. I mean, if we're going to do something, we got to do something. I don't want to drop the ball like they did the last time. That's why I ran and won the last time, was because somebody did say that. They did drop, they dropped the ball in that deal. When they, well,
We have
I'll tell you later.
we have a motion that has been seconded to withdraw the letter.
Hold on, let me just clarify something. It's my letter. You cannot withdraw my letter. You can
That's what the motion
You
is.
can't withdraw my letter. I would
Okay,
object
let's
to
do
that.
this. Let's, all right.
We
let me-
can
let-
move
let's
that
back-
off the
let's-
agenda.
Let's back up. I'm going to pull my withdrawal of the letter, on my motion on the letter at this point, so we can have more conversation here. You said, I can't make that decision. This is you talking, Z. You said, I cannot make the decision.
No, I will not.
The council has to do it. And I'm trying to foster some type of decision that the council can get behind. Okay, but now you're saying that can't be done.
Oh, I didn't say that.
Yes, you did. You just said you can't remove my
I'm saying,
letter.
you can't take away my letter. I wrote it. You can't, it
I'm not
can't
saying
be.
take away your letter and throw it in the trash.
What do you mean by withdraw the letter? What are you saying?
Move it from the agenda.
Move it
is
off
what
of
you
the
said.
agenda is basically what
So
I'm
you're
saying.
erasing it from history.
No, I'm not. I already removed that. I already removed that motion, okay?
What do you mean by with?
I accept the apology at face value as it is, okay? And I haven't been through all these mini resets that you have been, because I missed 5 or 6 meetings at one point, so I haven't missed the mini resets. I've been trying to pull this council together. I talk to everybody on this council continually about almost all issues that arise, okay? Because my goal is to be able to have everybody be able to draw on all 7 people for opinions and for conversation, okay? And I think that this is segregating the council, is what I think it's doing right at this point. And that's just what I think. I think it's separating, and I think it's causing dissension more so than if it stays in play. I mean, more so than if it should have, a conversation probably should have happened on the front end.
Well, I'll give you
of
that,
this.
but the issue is still, this happened, and the council has to deal with it. And if we don't deal with it, then we are shirking our responsibilities per the code. If we don't
Okay.
deal with it, and just to
Okay, we've-
withdraw the letter says, this didn't happen, let's just move forward like nothing happened, and that's not the way.
No, I think that we all know it happened. The whole town knows it happened.
Yeah, and they're watching to see if you do anything about it.
Right, and I think that what's been done is multiple conversations by all of us with the party that made the infractions, which is James, obviously, okay? And, I mean, I don't know what more I can do. You know, they're not privy to the conversations that I had with them, but they were somewhat, and James I think would admit, I mean, they weren't very pleasant at the beginning. I mean, there was some scolding going on there, but the fact of the matter is, you know, or self-policing, if we will. But where do you draw the line? I mean, what do you do with this letter?
The letter is just pointing out what happened. Now, you can't withdraw that, I've pointed it out. That's what I'm saying.
I know that,
All right.
and I've already pulled that motion back.
Okay, we haven't heard from one of the other members here. Don?
I'm kind of in the same boat with the rest of you. I probably knew it before a lot of you knew it because we talked about it that night after the meeting, and James immediately owned it. He knew he made a mistake. He knew he shouldn't have done what he done. And we've talked about it several times since. I mean, okay, so we have a letter here that said he violated the ethics. He knew that. He was telling me right off, you know, I feel so bad. I run my mouth. I should have, kept it shut or controlled it better, and I'm going to have to apologize. He was telling me that from the get-go. And he done exactly what he said he's going to do. So now we have this letter here. What do you want? Do we take off a finger? Do we, what is considered, what do you do with a
Could I
violation?
provide one option?
Sure.
A motion to accept the apology?
So moved.
That's what I asked for. That's what I said. You never heard that.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion to accept apology. It's been seconded. Any other discussion? Submit your votes.
Oh, yeah.
You want me to vote for him? I
No.
can wait just a sec.
No.
He's not in the room. I guess he didn't vote.
I guess he recused himself.
Wait till if you will wait till the last comments. If you will wait till the last comments, I'm going to tell you something.
What are we waiting?
I'm sorry, you've shown him, we'll go ahead.
Unanimous.
By unanimous vote of everybody that's in this room and can vote on this motion, the motion passes. The city manager reports, number 7.
I think I've talked enough.
Yes, it is.
My name's Jill Oakes, and I just want to clarify, because I did apply for those boards.
Yes.
And you stated you interviewed everyone, and I was not interviewed by.
I've called you 3 times.
Well, that's not interviewing me.
Okay,
So,
I'm sorry.
And I'm quite strep throat, so I didn't do tonight, but
Okay,
I just wanted to clarify.
okay, all right.
We're sorry, Jill.
Thanks.
Item number 8, request comments, city council. Councilman Bothroyd?
Again, I think just with everybody else, I just want to have clean, good meetings moving forward and everybody to have lots of conversation and work on items, kind of as if they were our own. And show respect and continually show respect, but also take a position. Because of what happened last week, I don't want to not be able to have council people take a position, because there's a lot of positions to be had moving forward that need to be taken, and that's it for me.
Councilman Case?
Well, we've gone through a lot of growing pains here in the last couple of weeks, trying to create a team out of what we've got here in Guthrie, and as you can see, it's kind of painful, and we make mistakes, and we've got a long way to go, and we've got some new members, and they don't know all the rules, and I'm going to put part of what happened up to that. At the same time, I think civility is kind of a human nature. I don't think it's something you got to learn. I think civility is just civility, and we've got to incorporate that into what we do, because we're working with you, and we owe you that. So that's all I have to say.
Vice Mayor Thomas?
I don't have a lot to say. I did hear some comments I just wanted to pass along, that city was getting some great comments from their participation at the Lazy E, at the barrel racing event that happened. I guess they just moved a major event from Oklahoma City, the fairgrounds, to the Lazy E, and the feedback that from an attendee there was that the city really knocked itself out, and I guess that's mostly comes on Justin, so thanks, Justin, for representing us well. I don't know who else was out there, but...
Verla Rain.
Verla.
Okay.
Good job.
Okay, so
And Edmonds Verla, whoever that is.
Yeah.
all right. I just want to make sure we got that out there, that you got some positive feedback, just people talking. I just heard it in the people talking.
Councilman Taylor?
Staff, thank you. I know this is a long evening tonight, but I appreciate all of what you say. Thank you, James. I appreciate the apology. If you have problems with what we did tonight, please contact any of us. Don't sit back and say nothing. I know some of you will. That's what I want. I want to hear from you. If you're not happy with what happened tonight. Or if you're happy with what happened tonight, I want to hear that as well.
Councilman Channel?
Well, I hate the lady that asked the question left, but everybody that's left here, I'm going to tell you what I found out after the last meeting and explain a little bit. I researched our procedures and meeting rules after that last meeting, trying to see where we went wrong. And I was told that we basically loosely follow Robert's rules. So I researched that, and according to Robert's rules, when that issue was asked to be split, the person that asked to do it had the right to ask to do it, and then a majority could okay it. That was one error that we made. Another one was, according to Robert's rules, when that issue didn't get a second, then there was nothing to be done with it, and you go on to the next item on the agenda. I copied and pasted all of that, and I sent that in an email to several here on the council, and I told them, I said, guys, I'm not trying to be the authority here, but I've dug into it, and here's what Robert's Rules says to do. And I said, I'm urging you guys I think everybody on the council needs to brush up on the procedures. And if we had known these procedures and been better at them than what we are, I don't think the thing would have happened in the last meeting, because we had several chances to write it, whether we split them or whether when it died, if we moved to the next item. However it was, if we'd had the procedures in place, I don't think we would have got all out in the weeds like we did. And I urged the people that I sent that out to polish up on the procedures for our meetings. Well, then when I get a reply back, I got a reply back from Leroy, and he says, well, in checking into it, the council has not adopted any rules or procedures for meetings since 1998. And it was version something that we weren't talking about. So, you know, when James and myself came on, we're the newest ones, we'd come on and they'd say, oh, you can't do it like this, it has to be done like that. Well, where do we find that? Well, that's just how it works. Well, don't do it this way, do it that way. Well, how do I learn that? Well, because we said. I don't like to play that way. So what I want to do, I want a workshop set up here in the near future. And Leroy's probably been in as many meetings as any of us sitting up here. I don't want to adopt, you know, a 5,000-page manifesto that we use to argue at every meeting over procedure. But I would like us to adopt something that is small and straightforward, that has the procedures, like when a person says, I want to make a motion to divide that, we know if the majority of us vote to divide it, then we divide it. Simple things like that will fix a lot of the problems we have. I don't care about, you know, getting so formal that I have to say, Mr. Mayor, can I talk? We're pretty good about working back and forth, all of us. But I want a workshop to look at a few options. Leroy may know some. I know there's an OML manual that he talked about. Whether it's Robert's Rules, OML, wherever they come from, I'm not well versed in it. But I want to work something out, and I really don't care who's that we use, as long as we're all using the same rules. You know, I don't want to use Bothroyd's rules for one meeting and Gentling's for the next. A lot of times that's what gets us in trouble, because if one says you can, one says you can't, how do we know? You can't look it up. Well, because we told you. Another thing, you know, in a little over a year, this council has the potential for half of it to turn over. And if we address it now and get something adopted to where we know what we're doing, and then if we do have new members come on the next one, we can go, here's your copy of how we run the meetings. Brush up on it, know what you're doing, and try to follow the rules. So that's the way I want it to do. I don't want the people after me to have to bump around in the dark like me and James have done. And I'm not portraying us as victims. I'm just saying we have to learn from the big dogs as we run after the pack, because there's nowhere to read any of this. You know, I researched it in Robert's rules. Well, we're not following Robert's rules. The lady said we broke Robert's rules, but they were never adopted here for us to use. We don't really have anything to know what we're using, and I think we need to fix that.
That way we can't ever break the rules, right?
That's right. If there is no rules, it's whoever bluffs who out. It's kind of like liar's poker. If I've got 6 5s, prove I don't. So that's what I'm asking for.
Okay, all right. Councilman Long.
We won't have another meeting until after Thanksgiving, so I hope everyone has a good and blessed holiday.
Okay, good. I'd like to also remind everybody about opening night on Saturday, the 30th, 6 o'clock, for the lighted parade. It's always a lot of fun, and I know if it comes anywhere near what it was last year, it'll be a huge, huge success. So be there. Be there. There are a few other competing things happening that evening, but this is where the game is, right here. Right here, folks. The game is right here. Yeah, we'll figure that out. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that being the last item on our agenda,